Morning, everyone. We're excited to have you join us for this webinar. This is the second in a quarterly series. All of the materials for all of the webinars will be available on the Vitalis website. So please do feel free to check back there for updates as we move along. My name is Amy St. Peter. I work with the Maricopa Association of Governments, and I'm happy to offer a few housekeeping notes before I turn it over to Suzanne Feaster for the official welcome and launch of the formal program. We would love to have you participate as much as possible. Please do offer your questions, your comments, your thoughts, your insights. We have a deep bench of expertise among the participants as well as with our speakers. If you would like to speak and offer a comment verbally, please feel free to unmute. If you are not intending to offer a comment or a question verbally, please do stay muted for the benefit of others and to create a positive listening experience for everyone. We have the hashtags here at the bottom of the screen. We encourage you to post any thoughts you might have about this topic, about this webinar, using those hashtags. In particular, I'd like to highlight the Home is Where It All Starts hashtag. That is the name of our public education campaign to increase acceptance of affordable rents and mortgages. We're working very hard to reshape the narrative around affordable housing, understanding that term carries with it quite a bit of baggage, and we want to be able to start more conversations about affordable rents and mortgages instead of closing them down. So please do feel free to share your thoughts about this on social media using those hashtags. At the end of our plenary session, our first plenary session, you'll have the opportunity to select your workshop that you'd like to attend. We will have 2 rounds of workshops. Each workshop will repeat in the same format. So once you've been to one, feel free to choose one of the other 3 workshops. If you do not select a workshop, one will be assigned to you. We anticipate having a lot of people coming into the webinar, and we'll need to move them very quickly into those sessions so you can have the full time and benefit of the speaker's expertise. At this point now in our program, I'd like to turn the microphone over to Suzanne Feaster. She is the head of the Vitalis Health Foundation and a leader in the community in a variety of different ways. Suzanne, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Amy. And thanks to all of you. If you look, we have over 130 participants so far, and my guess is we'll have a few more. There are a lot of organizations working on trying to build and trying to create more affordable and sustainable housing in Arizona. This gives you some idea of a collaborative that ACF, thanks to JP Morgan Chase Foundation, has helped to put together. So I want to thank all the participants in this group that have been working together. Next slide. What we want to focus on today is, and you have a PDF of this or a link to this in the chat, is understanding the housing continuum and funding sources, because it is complicated, and those of you that are involved in housing will know we talk about the stack. So it is the stack of different funding sources that allow these types of housing facilities to be developed. So temporary housing for emergency shelter, transition, also permanent supportive housing. What is listed in the orange are all the federal programs. We recently updated this chart. And so next slide. And then the PDF. Oh, you want to go forward? Oh, okay. So you only have those. Sorry, I thought we had both slides. So in the PDF, there is both the federal as well as state and local and explanations of all of those. So what we'll be doing today is talking about all these various opportunities and how these funding sources can be utilized together. So you'll see talking about braiding funding, how that stack, if you will, works, talking about working with diverse funders and how that goes together, and then talking about the team approach to funding. So again, this requires an enormous amount of collaboration to make this these types of housing units pencil out and work well with the community. And we'll talk about community land trusts. We have some great examples in Arizona, and we'll be able to highlight those today. I do want to call out, I saw Catherine Rieger from the Arizona Republic is on, and just thanking her and Arizona Community Foundation for the focus they have made on letting Arizonans understand fully the depth of the housing supply problem and what that impact has in the way of evictions, increase in homelessness, and the fragility of our economic well-being if we can't provide housing for all the employees and people that are coming in and continue to come into Arizona. So let me turn it over to Tom Simplot. You probably remember him as one of our esteemed and someone who was our former Arizona Department of Housing Director under the Ducey administration. He is now the Director of Housing Policy for Sugar Creek Capital, and he's going to make our opening remarks. So take it away, Tom.
Thank you, Suzanne. If there's one thing I learned during my tenure as Director of the Department of Housing is how important collaboration is. And all of you at this webinar clearly understand how important it is, because without all of us working together on the same page, moving in the same direction, we're not going to succeed in meeting the demand for housing that we have here in Arizona. So just a couple of things to kind of put things into perspective. I know a lot of you know these things already, but just to put it into perspective. Here in Arizona, to start with, oftentimes, let me back up, research done by the Arizona Department of Housing, we used some baseline numbers. At $25,000 a year baseline salary, that family or individual can afford rent of $625 a month, including utilities. All right, so keep that in mind, $25,000 a year, right? Can afford $625 a month for rent, including utilities. Now, what does that population look like? Department of Housing research shows that over 375,000 people in Arizona earn less than $25,000 a year. And when you break that down further, you see that 15% of that population lives in Maricopa and Pima. 19% of that population lives in outside of the rural areas, the balance of state areas. So what does that tell us? We know two things. First off, it's not just an urban issue. We are in dire need of housing in rural Arizona, on our reservations, on tribal lands. We need housing in the suburbs, affordable housing in the suburbs. We need housing all across the spectrum. And let's talk about what kind of housing Arizona has. And let's also talk about the fact that the overall need is across the entire spectrum. Yes, we absolutely need affordable housing. We need permanent supportive housing. We need all sorts of housing, including market rate housing. As we have failed to keep up with the need for affordable housing, the market rate housing has taken that inventory away from us. Those people, in essence, a lot of families are living, I hate to say it, but beneath their means. They're actually paying more for rent today for an apartment that 10 years ago would have been renting for far, far less, helping us meet the need for the affordable housing community. So with that, here in Arizona, our housing stock, 64% of our housing stock consists of single family homes. That's great. That was the Arizona dream for decades and decades, single family homes. But as we have matured and grown and our cities have become more dense, we have a greater need for higher density housing, which includes the affordable housing component. So once again, going back to our housing stock that we see today in Arizona, 64% of single family homes, 7.5% of our entire housing stock consists of those large apartment communities that everybody loves to complain about. Only 7.5% of our housing stock, 20 units and above, 7.5% of our entire housing stock. 10% of our housing stock consists of manufactured housing, which I might add plays a very important role in our affordable housing need here, meeting our need here in Arizona. 10% of our entire housing stock consists of manufactured housing. Now think about that number for a second and think about how our cities, towns, and counties have, at the request of many of their residents, tried to limit the construction of new manufactured housing across the entire state. It's very difficult to build apartments in Arizona now. It's very difficult to place manufactured housing in Arizona now. 25 years ago, that wasn't really the case, but it is now. And so what happens is the more we limit the ability to build more of these units, the more expensive it becomes to actually build them. A couple of real quick numbers. 12% of our entire housing stock are duplexes to communities up to 19 units. 12%, again, which just tells you we have a lot of movement to go. Every one of our cities and towns across Arizona, all of our city and town leaders have said we need more housing. And yet, when we look at surveys and polls, we know that even though their residents agree we need more affordable housing, we need more housing, period, they disagree when it comes down to putting that new housing in their own neighborhood. And that is the ongoing battle we have, not just in Arizona, but across the country. And that is part of what we're going to be talking about today, because the next component of that is, again, as we limit the ability to build new housing across the spectrum, the costs go up and up. Today, and some of our speakers will tell you this later, Joe Keeper would be the first to tell you, it will take at least 2 years by the time they start planning a new apartment community and the time they start digging dirt. It can be 2 years plus. By the time they get through zoning or general plan changes, zoning changes. And then of course, there's the architectural review, neighborhood review. All of that stretches out the timeline to build new housing, and it then increases the amount of costs to build all new housing. Now let's look at affordable housing real quick. And I know that's a term we're trying to get away from. Ironically, it wasn't that long ago when affordable housing was the new term, because people like to say low income housing. Well, that was a horrible term. Affordable housing, everybody thought was the term we could all agree on. Here we are now 10 or 15 years, and suddenly we have to come up with a new term. Guess what? No matter what term we come up with, eventually the neighbors are going to catch on and say, aha, you're talking about housing for someone that doesn't perhaps look like me or doesn't live like me. And that is part of the problem here, is people are so worried that people are going to move into their neighborhood that won't be just like them, that it's going to diminish their property values. And again, that's an argument that is being played across the country, and it's a real fight for everybody. So as we sit here today, we know we have a huge demand for more affordable housing. And I want to go back to the survey for 1 second. In Flagstaff, they actually did a survey. And when folks were asked in Flagstaff, do they believe they need more housing and affordable housing? The answer was yes. More than 80% said yes. But when it came down to would they agree that the housing could be built in their vicinity, the answer was a resounding no. So we have a lot of work to do. Affordable housing is some of the most expensive housing to build because of the rules and regulations and the financing. And I'm going to end up with this: financing. It takes so many different layers of financing to build affordable housing across this country. People have no idea. So just even if someone is successful, an entity, a nonprofit developer is successful in achieving or getting an allocation of low-income housing tax credits, they then need to add to that and of course get a loan, private activity bonds and other loans, grants, not to mention agreements with the city or town in which they're building. So I want to leave one thing with you, and that is thank you for being here. Thank you for your passion, for being a part of this conversation. And I truly do believe one way or another here in the next 3 or 4 years, we're going to build our way out of this current crisis. I have to believe that, because that's going to be the only solution. So thank you, Amy. Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Suzanne, for letting me be a part of this today.
Thank you so much. I'm really just thrilled that you're able to join us today. And thank you so much for everyone who was able to join us for the webinar. We're excited now to move from the plenary session into the breakout sessions.